Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back to another episode of After Maghrib. If you are where I am in the UK, you're probably snowed under, freezing, but inshallah you're keeping well and safe wherever you are in the world. And hopefully you guys are enjoying the World Cup as well, because of course today that's something we're going to be talking a lot about. We are proudly representing, supporting Morocco now that now that England are out of the World Cup, and we're backing our Muslim brothers to win the World Cup, inshallah. But before we go any further, it's time, of course, to introduce my co-host, as always, Sayed Ali Radhawi. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid.
How
you doing?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, all good. How's your week been?
My week's been great, alhamdulillah. Managed to attend a few Fatimiyya majalis.
Attend?
Yes.
And recite.
And recite, alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah.
But I can say one thing that went against me was catching a cold.
Oh no.
Alhamdulillah, I'm good.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
How have you been following the World Cup?
I have until England basically got disqualified.
Yeah.
But I've seen all the hype that's happening now, especially
Fata.
with Morocco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, of course it's been exciting, and you know there's so much to talk about, and I know we don't want to make this kind of just exclusively a football episode, but I think it's important to talk about the wider conversation of the World Cup, and there's so many conversations to have about representation of Muslims and Arabs in particular in the World Cup, and all of the news that's come out of it, for example, in terms of Palestine, in terms of talking about God, in terms of culture and religion. I know we touched on it at the beginning of the World Cup, but it's been exciting, hasn't it?
It has, especially for Muslims.
Yeah.
Nothing on a global level. Because for once, I think Muslims are being looked in a positive way, rather than blowing things up, for example.
Yeah.
If I can throw that in.
No pun intended.
No pun intended.
We talked about this because obviously it's ironic. Before the World Cup started, we talked about True Geordie, the YouTuber.
Yes.
We talked about how he made a bad joke in terms of Muslims and stereotyping Muslims, and subhanallah, the way things have kind of turned for the better. So now, in terms of the online community and obviously in real life as well, people are looking at Islam in a different light, and people are supporting Morocco in the World Cup. And I think what they've done is symbolic, because yes, okay, they've achieved what they've achieved so far to reach the semi-finals on merit. They've done really well, but also they've outside of the game, outside of the 90 minutes, they've represented Islam in an incredible light. And I have to shout out my boys, Mazraoui, Hakimi, Ziyech, Amrabat, Boufal, all these Moroccan players. MashaAllah.
You call them your boys?
Yeah, my boys.
MashaAllah,
I'm proud of them.
MashaAllah.
They're doing sujood at the end of the game.
That is something I think we should be grateful for.
Yeah.
Seeing, people on the world stage showing some worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thankfulness, being grateful. And it was beautiful also seeing their mums involved.
Yes.
Normally if they were not Muslim, if I can say this, we'll probably see them dancing with champagne.
Yeah.
But the fact they are Muslim, they went into sujood, they said Alhamdulillah, and the mothers were there with them.
Yeah.
And that's, there's a connection between a mother and Islam, given their status in religion.
Yeah, it's so nice as well, because there's relatability, I think, for guys like us and for others around the world, because their mothers, mashallah, are majority of them are wearing hijab and abaya, and they look like ordinary mothers from our community,
which is what Muslims are.
We are, yeah. And yeah, exactly. But it's nice to see it on a mainstream stage, and not just any mainstream stage. We're talking about the biggest platform in the world, the World Cup, the most watched tournament of the most watched sport in human history. Do you know what I mean? And the fact that it's being held in a Muslim country, and the semi-finalists of the World Cup are for the first time from an African and a Muslim country, is it's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
It is, and it's nice that you mentioned a Muslim country.
Yeah.
Because one thing I liked about Qatar, in this World Cup, was the fact where they quoted Quranic ayahs all around the stadium. Certain alleyways, certain rows. And it's so nice because even if you're a non-Muslim, you can look up to these quotes and learn something from them.
Yeah.
So and it's a reminder to Muslims ourselves at the same time. And one thing I saw very nice is that I don't know if it was authorized by the Qatari government themselves.
Yeah.
Or there was for example, we can say preachers or scholars all around the arena and stuff, where people can ask questions about Islam.
And this is, to be honest, this is the way it should be, because when Islam and many people may see it as imposing or forcing religion, or forcing your beliefs onto visitors to the country, but we know in Islam the responsibility of being a host. When someone visits your house in Islam, you have to treat them with all the mujamalat, with all the hospitalities, all the formalities, and more so when someone is visiting your country as a traveller. We know, of course, the rights of a traveller in Islam and Risat al-Huquq, and other places we see the rights of a traveller. But no, it's nice, mashallah, because there's so many beautiful things, I think, which have come out of this. I saw a news piece about a Brazilian family, if I'm not mistaken, who had reverted to Islam. An entire family, in the World Cup, and it was beautiful. They were standing with a sheikh, and the sheikh was doing an interview, and he was saying that I introduced Islam to them, and the family said we knew this was for us. We came here, and the way we were treated, and the things we saw, and the respect.
That's very true. You know, the media somehow only showed like negative sides to Qatar.
Yeah.
And I think that's in particular because it's a Muslim country.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it, the fans, those who went to attend the World Cup, saw a different story. I mean, just seeing clips from fans, actually, they're on the ground, you know, be it on their live streams, whatever it is, they gave a complete different picture. Yeah. They felt welcomed. Forget the alcohol. Yeah, a lot of people made this whole fuss about alcohol. They didn't need no alcohol. They enjoyed their time.
It's interesting. I've been watching a lot of vlogs and a lot of live streams of fans who are in Qatar right now and who are saying this is by far the best World Cup I've attended or even seen. Not just in terms of quality of sport, like the football is amazing, everyone can tell, but also in terms of the way they're being hosted. So locals are opening their doors up to visitors. You know, people are being fed on the street, mashallah. And to the point where a lot of people, fans who are attending, for example, from the UK, are saying that we want every World Cup to be held in Arab countries or Muslim countries because of not just the fact that their respect and hospitality is really good, but also the fact that the no alcohol point has made it more enjoyable.
Yeah, there was a guy actually from the UK. Yeah, I saw this post on Instagram was being shared. So he went with his wife and daughter to the World Cup. He said, this is the first time I've been to a football match where I didn't need to keep an eye on my daughter, for example. I didn't need to look behind on the shoulder to check out if anyone's like messing with my wife, for example. So he felt peaceful and safe in a Muslim country because there's no alcohol.
There's comfort, there's respect, there's hijab. And of course, we know, we have to be honest. Like, of course, every country will have its controversies.
Of course.
Every country will have, things to work on and improve on. And we know, of course, the Arab world has a lot of work to do.
And there was one story that was very interesting, by the way. Yeah. Some guy forgot his phone in the hotel, in the lobby.
Okay.
So he went to the stadium, watched the match, came back. His phone was still there.
No way.
His phone was still there.
No way.
That goes to show, for example, how I think you can see Islam in a positive way. I'm not saying Muslims don't steal. I'm sure there is here and there. But it's because we sort of have this law where we look up to, you can feel safe in a country like Qatar.
You know, sport generally, over the last few decades, especially as the world has become more globalized and everything, sport has become, for many people, like a religion. And that's something I want to talk about in a bit with you.
A'udhu billah.
No, honestly speaking, like it's become, people will travel the world to watch players, you know, let alone their teams, but they'll go travel across the world to watch, for example, Lionel Messi.
Yeah.
You know, I was listening to something earlier today where a guy says, I've traveled the world to watch Lionel Messi and now I'm in Qatar and this is the best experience I've had to watch him play. Now, when we live in a world where sport is so crazy and it's become so popular and everything, alongside that, people start to mix their societal norms, drinking, partying, swearing, lad culture, pub culture, all of that stuff with the sport. And now for the first time, you've got an environment where that doesn't exist.
You're enjoying sport.
You're enjoying the sport for the quality of the sport, and you're being hosted the way someone has prepared you to host and so on. And sometimes I think like, well, I would love the World Cup to be in the UK. I would truly love it as a fan and as a resident. But at the same time, there is no chance that this country could ever host the World Cup like Qatar is hosting the World Cup right now. You know, they've tailor-made this competition for the whole country's been preparing for this since 12, 13 years ago, whenever it was announced. So the whole country's been preparing, and imagine the huge boost it's given to the local economy, to the reputation of the country, tourism for years to come. People will go back to Qatar, people saying they love the city and Doha, and like it's amazing, mashallah, the sort of benefits that you can gain from it.
You know, speaking a bit about how I mentioned earlier, the media has only focused on the negatives. There was something interesting I read, slightly off track, but regarding the World Cup. there's not enough room in hotel rooms for the amount of people visiting Qatar at the moment.
Yeah.
So what has Qatar done as a country?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Containers.
Any idea?
They brought in a lot of containers, and they're also opening the homes up.
Not just that, they've actually paid for hotel rooms and flights to neighboring countries.
No
So they
way.
fly them out, keep them there. And when it's their time to come, they fly them back to Qatar. Yeah.
Wow.
And what's the negativity
incredible.
on it? Global emissions.
Yeah. Climate
They had to
change
find
crisis.
something, you know.
No, of course. I mean, it's like in the grand scheme of things. Of course, the climate issues are something.
It's important.
It's a big issue, yeah. But it's not. It's in the grand scheme of things. It's a minuscule impact, you know, on the global climate emergency.
Well, let's say the World Cup was in the US, for example.
Like the next one will be.
Will they face the same? You know, would the media be focusing on
do you know what? The next World Cup is in Canada, US, and Mexico. So 3 countries are sharing the next World Cup, 2026.
Okay.
And it's spread across different cities in all 3 countries. And a lot of people, I mean, there's obviously not so much coverage about it now, but people talk about it now in preparation for the next one. People are talking about going to Vegas and casinos. People are talking about, I was hearing a guy make a cracker joke about drug use in South America, in Mexico and so on. So there's already some murmurs of things which are not in line with Islam in terms of values. But obviously it would be an incredible experience. You know, I would love to go, inshallah. 4 years from now I can be there. But it's, you know, it's weird for the footballing world for the first time to have a World Cup in an Arab country or a Muslim country. It's never been done. And it's never been done in the winter. It's never been done in a country like that. So it's a big deal.
It is. I've got a question, Ahmed.
Yeah.
It might sound weird to many listeners, but I'm not a huge football fan.
Okay.
For me, it's like an object being kicked around on the grass. Yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah.
Unless it's like an England game or a Iraq game, which I'm heavily focused on.
Yeah.
But apart from that, I don't feel any connection with football. You mentioned a bit earlier, to some people it's a bit like religion. What's the whole fuss about football?
Football in many parts of the world is treated like a religion. In the UK, football is a religion. I had family visit the UK a few days ago, and they noticed that football here is treated like a religion.
Okay.
And for many people, it might be a lack of a higher purpose, an ultimate purpose, such that they then identify themselves with an entity like a football club, or with personalities they can look up to like football players. And it's not just football, it can be any sport. But at the end of the day, football in its nature is a very emotional sport. There's the intellectual side and the tactical side. There's, you know, a system that comes with the sport. It's a genius sport. But at the same time, there's emotion, there's heart, there's sentiment, there's passion in football. Do you see what I mean? So I think when people look at football as a whole, it brings them life, it brings them soul. So at a time like this where you have the World Cup, people will, in ordinary circumstances, like we said, go crazy. So, for example, in the UK, when England lose a match, you know, this is pre this World Cup, I don't know about this World Cup, but when England lose a match in in football, domestic abuse rates in the UK are higher.
I saw some billboards with that.
Yeah. When England lose games, more women are beaten by their husbands.
You know how England have his coming home?
Yeah.
There was a billboard saying he's coming home. So basically, I think what it meant is that England lost the game.
Yeah.
He's left the pub.
He's his
drunk.
way.
He's coming home.
Yeah.
God forbid, you know, what happens next.
But that's what I mean. So people take it really seriously, and there's a fine line to be drawn. And this is a conversation I wanted to have. Like, we as Muslims, we understand that there is priorities for us.
Yeah.
So World Cup final is on, for example, and it's time for Salah. What do? Do you know what I mean? It's a very tricky situation for a lot of us, to be honest. You know, it's very hard for us to pause a match for 20 minutes and go and pray and come back. And do you know what I mean? And I think for a lot of people, it's a test of our dedication to religion.
Yeah.
You know, like, do I spend more time listening to football stuff, podcasts, playing FIFA and all of that stuff? Or do I spend more time building my connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
You know, I think it's very valuable to the conversation that you brought that up, Ahmed. Do you know why? Because everyone can name the entire football team. Everyone can know who their wives are, who their kids are, what kind of mansion they're living in. They know everything about them, but they can't name more than 2 prophets.
Yeah.
They don't know more about the Ahlul Bayt, for example.
100%.
So I think it is a bit true where you say people actually take it to be sort of like religion. And it's a shame, because I think we can find balance in it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you think about it, like you said, I heard
because that example can relate to anything. To be honest,
it can relate to anything. You know, you can talk about music, for example. People know the lyrics of a rap song before they know the verse of the Holy Quran. You know, you can apply it to many things, and I think it's important for us to think about the relationship we have with the dunya and the relationship we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and whether we prioritize one over the other. You know, it's really easy for us when we're watching football to get carried away. And look, I'll be honest, I think we should enjoy sport. I think we should enjoy football. I think we should make the most of it. It's a time to bring people together. You can enjoy it in a fun and halal way. You know, it's an opportunity to celebrate diversity. It's an opportunity to celebrate athleticism, all of these things which are highly, highly encouraged in Islam. But at the same time, it's important for us to realize that it's not the be-all and end-all. Like football and the World Cup and so on, it's not the reason that we do the things we do. Do you know what I mean? So we can enjoy it, but you know, there's got to be a balance.
I went to a majlis.
Yeah.
Fatimiyya. Friday packed.
Yeah.
Saturday.
England playing.
Half empty.
Really?
You can tell people's priorities.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was an observation I made. Yani.
It happens. When was it? It's always the same. I remember a few years ago. I think it was. If I'm not mistaken, it was the big Champions League game, and it was Muharram night.
Bro, I've been to weddings.
Yeah.
And people are watching football at a wedding.
I'm not gonna lie. If my wedding day fell on World Cup final, I'm watching that game with my wife.
Allahu Akbar.
Straight.
As long as it's with your wife.
Walking down the aisle with the phone in the hand, watching a stream. It's got to be done, man. But to be honest, look, if you think about it, football is a big deal. If you're watching it at your wedding, your football is one thing. But what about mosques, okay? Because I want to have this conversation as well. There's a lot of centres in our community which have been streaming the football matches recently.
Yeah.
So, for example, we know, of course, in the last few nights, there's been, is it the second narration of Fatimiyya, which we've been commemorating?
Yes.
And of course, at the same time, England was playing over the weekend, for example. Now, for some people, it's a very awkward position. For some communities, they don't commemorate the second narration. Do you see what I mean? So for those communities, they'll be streaming the games, even inside the centre, or even just not attending majalis to watch the games, like you said.
I mean, if they're not commemorating, makes sense. I know some people find some narrations weaker than others.
Yeah.
Understandable. But it's nice as a community. Let's imagine it's not Fatimiyya, for example. Yeah. It's nice as a community, allowing everyone to get together to enjoy the game. I think it's nice.
Is it disrespectful? Because I heard an argument a couple of days ago where a guy said that this is a mosque. Firstly, I don't know if we can say that, because a lot of our centres are not actually mosques. They're imam bargahs or they're Husseyniyas or whatever. But someone saying that this is a place of worship, you shouldn't be showing a football game, is disrespectful.
That's a tricky one. And I don't think I can touch on it, to be honest.
Really, yeah?
I've got no knowledge on, if one should do so, one shouldn't. I have no idea.
Fair enough. I respect that.
No idea.
I respect that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an important conversation to have, because if your ultimate aim is to bring believers together to for example, in many centres you'll have like social nights, you'll have poetry workshops, or you'll have like art workshops or whatever. You know what I mean? And you're doing something recreational to bring people together.
We used to have table tennis.
Yeah,
sleepovers.
Can
you imagine
PlayStation, sleepovers, all of that stuff. Why is it any different when you're watching a football game? You're bringing the youth together. You're bringing parents and children together. Like if I had a son who's 15 years old, I would rather take him to the mosque to watch games with his friends and our community than to let him go out and watch it with his mates somewhere where I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point. It's a place you can trust.
Yeah.
And be comfortable, leaving your kids
No swearing, no alcohol, none of that. It's a good environment. It's bringing the youth together. It shouldn't be something, I think, demonized.
Okay. I got a question for you, Ahmed.
Okay.
Very shortly, Morocco is going to be playing.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Morocco.
Yeah.
Who are you supporting, France or Morocco?
Oh, bro, come on. It's not even
why? I want to know why.
All right, I have like 5 reasons.
Okay.
I'll just try and quickly summarize them. Firstly, France beat us, so I'm not supporting France.
Fair enough.
Secondly, I don't want France to get to final because they won the last World Cup. Thirdly, and probably most importantly, I want Morocco to win. Not
why?
Because they're,
That's what I want to know why.
Not because they're underdogs. Not because they played good football, but also because on top of that, they're the first Muslim and an Arab country and African country to reach the semi-finals of the World Cup.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and they've deserved to get to where they belong.
They're making history, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah, they're making history. They've already made history, and they'll continue to do it. And they've been fighting like warriors, those players. They've been playing really well. They're really good. They're a fantastic team, honestly speaking. I don't think they'll win. I'm not going to lie. I think they'll get battered by France.
You never know.
Allah's with them, inshallah. But it's, you know...
Who would have thought Portugal was going out?
Yeah. Yeah. Spain.
Yeah.
Morocco beat Spain as well. Crazy shock. This World Cup's been full of shocks.
Yes, it has. Although I'm not a die-hard football fan.
Yeah.
I do sort of look at the news here and there.
Who are you supporting?
I was supporting England.
Okay.
But now I'm not supporting no one. But now in this game that's coming up now, I'm supporting Morocco, inshallah.
You know, the Moroccan coach, he made a statement. He said, we are representing Moroccans and Africans. Please support us and help us make history. And his statement was twisted to say we are only representing
Arabs,
not even Arabs. It was Moroccans and Africans. Do you know what I mean? So people completely misconstrued what he was saying to make it sound like we don't want anything to do with you guys. We are only for our Moroccans, for our nationals. Do you know what I mean?
You know, I have no doubt that this was probably done on purpose, and they probably want to remove, you know, Muslims out of the limelight and make it focus just on Morocco as a country itself and Africa as a continent itself. But I think if we look realistically, Morocco is more than just a country. It's actually, I think, representing Islam on the global stage. Why?
Yeah.
We mentioned they done sujood. We mentioned, for example, them, you know, doing gestures, thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But something they did which was very interesting. They gave a voice to the voiceless. Palestine. What was your thoughts on that?
There's been a lot. There's been a lot of pro-Palestine.
Because when they did that, the entire Muslim world was like, "You guys, we love you."
Yeah, there's been a lot of pro-Palestinian coverage across the World Cup, and a lot of, for example, journalists from other countries in the occupied state of Palestine who have come to the World Cup and who are doing interviews, and people would refuse to speak to them.
Yeah, I've seen those.
You know, and it's not just that. It's also, for example, English support. I've seen so many videos of English fans who will say "Free Palestine" in interviews, or who will, for example, who will come to the World Cup with one impression and speak to locals and speak to Palestinians and learn a lot about their plight. And it's interesting to know that, you know, we talk about sport not having to be a geopolitical thing, or not having to be something which causes strife between people, but sport can bring people together, and it can become a geopolitical thing for the better if it's used in that, you know, in that respect. So, for example, people can learn about different cultures. People can learn about different religions. They can learn about the trauma that people around the world are going through, and all it takes is that willingness to open your heart and your mind up to visit another country, to meet new people, to engage in new conversations. And I have to give credit, because there's been so many English fans, British English fans, who've gone over to Qatar, and not just English, all around the world, and who've learned about the new religions, the cultures, the plight of the Palestinian people as well. And I think Morocco getting to semi-finals, whether or not they win tonight, inshallah they do. But the idea being is that their presence on this world stage at this level that they've got to itself is a huge benefit. You know, they've done a lot of good, and I don't think they'll realize.
No, they're done more good to, I think, the global Muslim world.
Yeah.
Because we are now being seen in a positive light. The fact they've reached at this stage in the World Cup, you know, has put Islam or Muslims on the world map.
Yeah.
Because I mentioned earlier at the very beginning of this conversation, where for the first time we're not blowing ourselves up. You said pardon the pun. And I think if the media stop suppressing how beautiful Islam is as a religion, I don't think we will even be having this discussion right now.
That's correct.
The fact we're discussing this, there is something going on. Western media, whatever it is.
Well, I just want to give a shout out to a friend of ours called Ahmed and Ali from New York, who was meant to actually be on the podcast with us, but unfortunately things didn't work out, and it's snowing in London and it didn't work out. But he's an actor and he's a film producer, and he's, mashallah, he's done a lot of work. He's won in so many film festivals around the world. He's very successful, and a lot of what he focuses on is Muslim representation in Hollywood and in media.
Yeah.
So he acts in films, and he produces films which focus on taboos that Muslims have and so on. And of course, when you look at like Netflix and so on, look how are Muslims represented most of the time? either they're represented as terrorists and all of that stuff, or more recently, you know, the shows like Miss Marvel, for example, where they're represented as young, rebellious girls taking off their hijab, meeting boys at school. Storyline. It's one or the other. Like, there's no, you don't have like an ordinary character. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's some shows, okay, they'll have like an ordinary character who's presumably Muslim by their name. Do you know what I mean? But it's a very rare phenomenon to see that.
It is. And unfortunately, I think sometimes it's our fault that we don't shed light on it as much.
Yeah.
So it's important to have, you know, platforms such as the After Maghrib podcast, which is why people should subscribe.
And
we're going to talk about...
smash it.
We're going to talk about the giveaway very soon, because we just released one. So inshallah, we'll touch on that. But it's important for platforms, if we're not given a voice, we create that voice. Let the world hear the echoes of who Muslims are. Yani, we shouldn't learn from Netflix that, for example, okay, if this girl is wearing hijab and she takes it off throughout the series, that means, okay, she's either she's confused, or she feels oppressed, or she feels forced to wear it. And that's a false narrative that's happening.
100%.
And that's just one example. I gave the example of blowing ourselves up, for example. And it's not just Muslims, by the way. I think the Africans have it as worse as we do. They always like the villains, or they're always like, unfortunately, it's sad.
It's very sad. I think a lot of minorities, religious and ethnic minorities, have been misrepresented for years in the media. You know, there's an incredible amount of misrepresentation, and it's slandering at the end of the day. You know, it's unfair. It's not right. You know, but the one thing that we have to say is that at the end of the day, there's an important thing for Muslims to do, and that is to take a step forward and try and involve ourselves. So, you know, and I know we do this and it's hard, but for example, if you're playing football, you know, take it seriously. You never know. If you reckon you're good enough to play professional football, keep at it. And if you're a parent out there and you're watching, encourage your kids to play sports. You never know what heights your children could reach.
Including the Quran, inshallah.
Including Quran. Honestly, you're right. And if your children are interested in drama and acting, and this is my personal opinion, of course, I think one should pursue it.
I would love seeing Shia acting. I think that's something that we really need to get into.
I have a friend, a really good friend of mine. He's a great friend of mine. He's an actor. Like, as in, he's got his job and he's he's doing his own thing. He works in like advertising and so on. But on the side, just to make some spare change, he does extras for films. So he's been in like Leonardo DiCaprio films. He's been in big films, like films that you've definitely watched. And he's poor guy. When he was young, he was always getting cast for roles as terrorists. So he would be cast, and it's really sad because obviously now he's grown, and this I'm talking about 20, 30 years ago.
It doesn't surprise
now
me. Now
he's grown up, and he's now developed a portfolio. He's got enough credit to demand a different role or whatever. But he told me, I remember very specifically, he said, it's impossible to get into that industry as a Pakistani or an Arab and a young Muslim with a beard and so on, unless you're playing a specific role. You know, a role that someone wants you to play. You can't apply. You can't put yourself forward for a mainstream role if you're not white American or white British. In some cases. Do you know what I mean? So it's tough. You know, but at the end of the day, I think there is an onus on us. There's a responsibility on us to take things more seriously like that. It's not just acting in football. Talking about teaching, talking about science, talking about a degree in law, whatever it is in different fields. Continue to excel and to be, inshallah, at the top of everything.
Do you remember when Trump was in power? And you brought this Muslim ban? There was one thing where he mentioned, where he said, I think Islam hates us. Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember,
That, as a Muslim, I was shocked. The president, although I can say it doesn't surprise me for political gain, but the fact the president of the United States actually said, Islam hates us, he fed into that narrative.
Of course, 100%.
Somehow we need to find a way where I can say, you know, if you are not Muslim listening to this podcast, for example, make sure you know where you're getting your news from.
What sort of world do we live in where the leader of the free world in the president of the US could say Islam hates us, or where the Prime Minister of the UK at the time can say that women look like letterboxes and bank robbers? What sort of world is that? You know, we're meant to be a civilized Western post-liberalist world that we live in. How can one say we live in a world of freedom of speech and freedom of expression and belief, and at the same time we hear stuff like that? You know, there is a responsibility on us to hold such people to account, hold such systems to account. And as Muslims, to use our voices. We believe in empowerment. What's the point of following the example of Sayyidah Zainab, salamullahi alayha, or Sayyidah Fatima Zahra, salamullahi alayha? In these nights, of course, we commemorate her. If we don't know how to follow their example in standing up to oppression, and we say that phrase, standing up to oppression, it sounds very cliche, but in practice, it's effective.
Yeah.
You know, you speak out when you hear someone talk smack about you. You know, you have to speak up. You have to say something, whether it's signing a petition on the very lowest level, which is like takes a minute of our time, or whether it's going out there and speaking to people, speaking to your MPs, educating people in schools, being part of focus groups and action groups. Like, these are things that we can get involved in. But, you know, at the end of the day, Muslims will never, ever be represented fairly and equally unless two things happen. One is the mainstream establishment gives us the respect we deserve, and two is Muslims force our way into it.
You know, there was a report I read, you just mentioned mainstream. More than 70% of news articles when it comes to Islam and Muslims is negative. Negative. How? Maybe not just the article itself. I'll give you one example. If they want to, let's say there's a criminal.
Yeah.
And his name is Ahmed, for example. They show him in the most scruffiest way.
Why did you pick that name?
Huh?
Why did
it's the most common name, Ahmed. not because you're next
to me.
All right,
Ali. Yeah.
But the way they show or portray this criminal, for example, is in the most disgusting way that you'd want to hate Islam yourself. But let's say it's someone who's not a Muslim and his name is John, or Harry, or Barry, or whoever they are. They'll show a nice smiling picture with his wife and his kids for the same crime. But it just depends who they're.
Yeah,
so there's a bias and there's an agenda. You can clearly see it.
We hear about it all the time. And to be fair, again, another shout out to Muqdad Versi, part of our community, who's done incredible work, scrutinizing and holding the media to account over the last few years, who has consistently held mainstream media to account for their misrepresentation of Muslims versus non-Muslims. So specifically, for example, when you talk about the representation of criminals, like you say, and for Muslims, they'll use the word like terrorist.
Yes.
Or they'll talk about politics and political gain. And when it's a white Englishman or a white American man, they'll use the word
mental health.
Yeah, mental health, lone wolf, you know, deranged, psychopath, things like that. Lone wolf. Like, these kind of wordings and terminologies subconsciously have an effect and shape the way generations think for years to come. You know, and unfortunately, again, I'm going to go back to that thing that True Geordie said. And if you haven't heard the podcast, tune in. We've probably 2 or 3 podcasts ago, we talked about this guy who said that Muslims blow themselves up, and he did a full apology and did a podcast follow-up and so on. But generally speaking, I think a guy like that, who's actually probably not a bad guy, but has been conditioned to think in a way like that, is because of a result of the society he lives in.
Even us as Muslims, I know many people who actually look at Muslim countries and feel as if we're backward, or they feel as if we're not progressing, or, you know, we are like medieval times, and that's because of what they see on TV, what they read in the newspaper, and what they watch in movies, for example. But when they go to that country, they're like, no, that can't be it.
Yeah, that's exactly what you said just now. Is exactly why the Qatar World Cup is a big deal, because people have gone there and they've had a perception about Islamic countries and Arab countries, and they've come back after England's lost, or they're still there and they're having a ball of a time. So inshallah, we pray, you know, there's.
I just want to add to what you just mentioned. I'm not saying the UAE is the most best representative of Islam and its values, for example, but there was one family that I know. No, they're not Arab, they're not Muslim. They went to the UAE.
Okay.
And they managed to interact, speak, you know, see some of the tradition and the culture and the values Islam has, for example. And they were shocked. Wallah, they were absolutely shocked. And when they came back, they were like, you guys are like human beings. They were being very, very genuine, sorry.
Really?
And they live a few doors down the road from us.
Wow.
So,
There's so much good that can come out of interfaith and multiculturalism. And it's, you know, it's really nice when you have conversations. Like, my neighbours are Hindus, and we're really close to them now. We learn a lot, and like, alhamdulillah, they've learned a lot about us and the way we practice and so on. So inshallah, there's more that we can do as a community. I think we need to be more open to that.
Inshallah.
We need to encourage people to learn more about us, and we should also do the same, learn more about others. You know, we mention all the time in the pod that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, you know, we've created you into tribes and different people so you can get to know one another. So hopefully we can represent ourselves better, we can be represented better, and we can make an effort to learn.
Inshallah. I just got a final question.
Yeah.
Do you think Muslims have integrated enough?
That's a huge question, Sayed.
Maybe another podcast.
Yeah. You mean in the UK or?
From your perspective, like being here in London.
Bro, that's a huge question, man. I mean, the Muslim community in the UK is so sporadic. On one end, the lowest...
Why I say that? Because I've always heard, Muslims need to integrate more. But
yeah. No, it's true. It's true to a degree.
But maybe maybe they're not getting in the right Uber rides. I have no idea.
Yeah.
As an example.
Yeah.
Yes, we are paying, taxes, whatever it is. Like we are there wherever you want us to be.
Yeah, of course.
We're doctors, we're dentists, we're engineers, we're
civil engineers. Shall I tell you what it is,
yeah?
That, in my opinion, my humble opinion.
They want you to leave Islam. I think that's what they mean by integrate more.
The thing is, you've got two ends of the scale with the Muslim community in the West. In the UK, the lowest performing demographic of UK residents, statistics say, are 35 to 40-year-old Bangladeshi women living in East London. In terms of salary, in terms of literacy rates, in terms of healthcare, in terms of benefits, so on and so forth. But at the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, some of the highest performing school students are Muslims. The most philanthropic people in the UK are Muslims. 8 out of 10 Muslim families in the UK give charity on an annual basis, which I personally think is 10 out of 10.
In fact, speaking of charity, I heard Muslims in the UK are more charitable than all the other faiths.
Yeah. So 8 out of 10 Muslim families give charity once a year. We're a minority. 8 out of 10 Muslim families give charity once a year, which I think is 10 out of 10. But anyway, in the UK, 3 out of 10 average family members or whatever, Christian or whatever, give charity in the UK. And 1 out of 10 atheist families in the UK give charity. This is paraphrasing, I might be wrong statistically, but I remember it very clearly, a BBC article a few years ago. And it's really interesting to note this because have we integrated correctly? It depends what you mean by integration. Do you know what I mean?
I think we have. I'm not sure why I asked you that question.
Yeah.
But since we were talking about, being misrepresented in a way.
Yeah.
I just feel like when people say, why are Muslims not integrating?
Yeah.
I think they mean we should, lose our faith. Is what they mean.
Potentially.
And that's the only way they're going to accept us.
There's a lot of values that Islam gives which the UK and the West can benefit from. And I'm sure there's a lot of values in the West which Muslims can benefit from.
Of course.
Specifically Muslims and not Islam, because Islam we believe is perfect.
Of course.
But Muslims can learn a lot from the Western culture. And we should always continue to push ourselves and learn. Smash that like button, guys. We have a quick announcement before we wrap up the pod, Said.
Not just smash the like button. Subscribe. Because
Ya Allah.
The whole point of this giveaway is that we've crossed 1,000
Allah
subscribers.
grant us noble subscribers, inshallah.
Inshallah. Righteous, pious subscribers.
Inshallah. So guys, we've hit that 1K mark and we promised you a giveaway. So if you check out our Instagram at After Maghrib Podcast, you will see our latest post is a giveaway post. And on that post, you will see notes about how you can enter this competition. And what do you win? You win After Maghrib merchandise. A mug like this, an Awaited Co hat,
an Awaited Co hoodie.
Where have we seen that hoodie before?
Episode 19, I think.
Oh wow!
I'm not gonna podcast, but they can go to at Awaited Co on Instagram, check them out, and you'll understand what merchandise we're talking about. And the steps for the giveaway is so easy. Just 2 steps. Tag 3 people. Yeah. And like the post.
Nothing else. And make sure you're following, of course, the pages.
And there's 5 winners.
There's 5 winners.
Yeah.
5 winners. So you can win as long as you're in the UK or Europe or US. You can win the giveaway. And yeah, guys, support Shia brands, support Shia clothing brands because we're trying to back each other. And inshallah, you can be one of the winners. Hope you are. And inshallah, we'll announce the winners soon. Anything to add, Said?
Just no.
Dima Maghrib.
Just at least we haven't recorded after midnight. I know last week was after midnight, so it can be called After Maghrib.
Yeah. Inshallah.
I did want to mention, just a day before the team After Maghrib, they put something on Instagram story where they said what topics.
Oh, yeah.
MashaAllah, the amount of
wow.
Crazy.
Dozens
topics I didn't even imagine people wanted to have a conversation
I screenshotted so many of them,
Let me tell you, from addiction to mental health.
I'm just gonna read out a couple to you, which really
please do, because we've got your feedback, we've got your topic suggestions,
yeah, man. I mean, look, for example, what are the signs of the reappearance of Imam Mahdi? Marriage and istikhara, alcohol, education in Islamic studies versus education in secular studies. These are crazy topics, mashallah. Sunni books on Ahl Sunnah and how they compare to the books in our school of thought. Addictions and how our society deals with them. Why religion has become boring in today's day and age. Atheism. You know, there's so many biographies of our imams, mental health, Sayyid versus non-Sayyid marriage. There's so many amazing suggestions, guys. So thank you so much for sending them in. Hopefully we'll get to them. There's a lot to go through.
Inshallah. We will, no doubt. With your support, inshallah, with your continued support. And inshallah, everyone's benefiting.
Yeah.
And inshallah, we see you same time next week.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.